Scared for Reals.
Hey, it's Chris O'Neill.
Adam Perry.
And welcome to the third episode of Scared for Reals, where we're going to take a deep dive into not only Old Boy, which is 20 years old this month, but we're also going to talk about the Vengeance trilogy a little bit, and more importantly, talk about Park Chan-wook. Park Chan-wook, who's probably one of the most popular South Korean filmmakers out there. We got to go back to the late 90s because Old Boy is based on a Japanese manga. It was in this weekly magazine. I don't know if you read about it, Adam.
I've heard about it.
Yeah. It was a weekly magazine called Weekly Manga Action. It was like only around for a couple of years, but they had like 79 chapters in this manga. You have this protagonist, a man who after a decade of incarceration and some sort of private prison we don't really know, is suddenly freed, but after his release, he must find his captors and discover the reason for his confinement. That is the only similarities in the plot when Park Chan-wook executed Old Boy. Back in 2003, he was fresh off of Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, which it's now kind of revered, but at the time, Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance was not a success. I mean, at the time, he had Joint Security Area, which was like the biggest financial success in South Korea. I mean, before that, he had like a couple of films that just, kind of came and went. Old Boy was interesting, and you were just talking about the budget for it, how it wasn't as successful at the time. But it grew in popularity. But before we talk about even that, the producer apparently was bored one day, decided to go to a comic book store, and he picked up this graphic novel, Old Boy, immediately thought, wow, this would be kind of cool. So they started filming it. But there was a lot of differences. I know Park Chan-wook in interviews has stressed over and over again, the thing that was the most fascinating to him was not of him being in prison or why. It's, okay, what happens now? He's released from prison, from whatever prison it is. Again, we don't really know. It's at some apartment complex that he was in prison for 15 years. In the manga, he's in prison for 10 years. In this one, it's 15 years for a very key reason. And just so you know, since we're going to be doing a deep dive into Old Boy, there's going to be a lot of spoilers, a lot of them. So if you haven't seen Old Boy yet, do not listen. Watch the movie. You got to experience it once. And if you like it somewhat, you've got to watch it a second time, because you watch it the first time. Like Adam, you just watched it the first time. And
just last night, yeah.
And you were floored, weren't you?
I was.
Yeah,
I was. It's definitely a unique watch. A beautifully shot film. I like the pacing of the movie, but the content is definitely like kick you in the teeth. Like, what am I watching? And did they really just say what they just said? Is this really how it's playing out?
Yeah. In this manga, just so you know, not only did it inspire Old Boy, the Park Chan-wook masterpiece from 2003, but because of that, I mean, the manga kind of grew in popularity. It's like you could find it in more stores around the world. People were just reading it, seeing it for the first time. And there was two other remakes. There was this Indian production called Zinda, which I haven't seen it. I don't think you can even find it anywhere because it was so much like Old Boy. The filmmakers and the people who made Old Boy were not too happy. I think that in a lawsuit.
Rights issues then?
Yeah, it was kind of a similar situation with Kurosawa and Sergio Leone, because as you know, Sergio Leone made Fistful of Dollars.
Yeah.
But if you watch Yojimbo, which was made a few years before that, it's like, wow, this is too much alike. Leone claimed, I'd never even seen. And it's like, come on, man, it's the same exact plot, But it was kind of a similar situation with Old Boy and Zinda. And of course, Spike Lee famously remade it. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, it was just the interesting thing. Park Chan-wook really loved the graphic novel, probably just as much as the producer. He made a lot of changes. It was not exactly like the manga. It was not.
No.
No. I haven't seen every single, because there's an amazing 3.5 hour diary that Park Chan-wook had for Old Boy. I haven't dived into that fully. And then there was a feature length documentary about the making of Old Boy, which runs almost 2 hours.
Oh wow.
But there's some fascinating stuff in there. Apparently the producer, screenwriter, and Park Chan-wook were just sitting down because, again, the big fascination was what happens happens when Choi Min-sik, the main character, or the main actor of the movie, what happens to him when he comes out of being in prison for 15 years? That was the big thing. And I haven't done a deep dive into why the incest thing came up.
Yes, folks, you just heard Chris right.
Yes, the incest thing.
Incest.
Yeah, if you've seen Old Boy, the plot twist has a lot to do with incest, okay? So the reason why Choi Min-sik's character is in prison for 15 years is because Old Boy has something to do with the name of the school they all attended when they were younger. Choi Min-sik's character, and it's funny how the character's name sounds a lot like King Oedipus. Is that how you say it? Yeah, with the love for his mom. Yeah, remember that whole the whole Greek mythology. King Oedipus. Yeah, there was a reason why his character was named the way it was, is because of the tragic King Oedipus there.
Yep.
There's a lot of similarities. This guy's obviously a tragic. He's not like a hero, because that's the interesting thing is Choi Min-sik kind of played him as like a hero.
Yeah.
He's a hero. He's going to right all the wrongs, but the problem is he's a very flawed individual. Like everyone in the movie is flawed. And that was the interesting thing with Park Chan-wook is he really, I think he came from a middle-class family. Mm-hmm. He had a great upbringing. I think his father was a professor, and they grew up in a well-established place, and I think he wanted to be a film critic. From what I gathered, some of the brief stuff that I watched, the thing that changed him though was Hitchcock. He came out of a screening of Vertigo, and like James Stewart's character, he was obsessed. And that was the thing, the obsession part of that story, I think, and the colors. Yeah. If you notice with Old Boy, it's such actually all of his movies, even most recently Decision to Leave, a twisted romance tale that it's not as twisted as Old Boy, but it came out last year. And if you have a chance to stream it somewhere, Adam, you've got to check it out.
That's it. I don't think there's very few movies out there that can be as twisted as Old Boy.
Well, that's the thing. Like years ago, I'm kind of jumping around here, but Martin Scorsese was at the Lake Placid Film Festival back in 2004. He was, I think it was 2003, 2004. He was working on The Aviator at the time. He was working on the post-production for that. And he had a 3-hour conversation, which, I could listen to Martin Scorsese talk for several hours, but he was talking about South Korean cinema. You look back at 2003, Old Boy hadn't been released yet, but I think it was post-production because they talked about filming it in May. It might have been in 2002, but it was in post-production. Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance had been out, and of course, Joint Security Area. Martin Scorsese was talking about Park Chan-wook. He was talking about Bong Joon-ho. All these names where the rest of the world is like 100% familiar with. At that time, I'd never heard of any of them. We had better access to world cinema in the early 2000s, but now it's like you can watch movies from anywhere in the world, most of them. But it was fascinating when I first saw Old Boy. I did not see it in the theaters. It stinks because there was a 20th anniversary restoration and they released it in the summer, but I think like 1 or 2 theaters in Albany had it.
Wow.
And in this area, we didn't really get a lot of screenings for it. And, it's like gas prices and stuff going back and forth to watch a movie. I couldn't convince the wife to do that. But Old Boy has been gloriously remastered in a 20th anniversary 4K restoration that Park Chan-wook personally supervised. Neon Pictures is going to be releasing the 4K disc, which is, I think it's coming out either this month or next month, right on the nose of the 20th anniversary release.
So this movie is a bona fide cult classic. It's clearly built over the years because, as we mentioned earlier, this movie was made on a budget of 30 mil. It topped at 17 mil. So It did not make its money back. It's a flop.
No. Well, it was a flop at the time, but it's definitely surpassed that amount.
So
it was the budget.
Cult classic.
It eventually made all of the money back and then some. So the people who were involved, the people who helped fund it, they definitely got more than compensated for it because the subject matter is not for everyone. He took the basic vengeance plot that you see in all these film noirs.
Right.
You see the film noirs, you see a lot of Westerns too because he was a huge fan of Sam Peckinpah, Sam Fuller, who both made Westerns. Mm-hmm. They weren't your typical Westerns though. They were very dark. Thise characters who aren't always the nicest. They're kind of gritty characters, gritty stories. So not only was he inspired by Hitchcock, but he was also inspired by American filmmakers, Sam Fuller and Sam Peckinpah. Revenge, which Tarantino You mentioned Tarantino. Tarantino was a member of the Cannes Film Festival jury that year. And because of him, because of all of his success and everything, he was probably the biggest champion for Oldboy. And that's what brought the movie to even more success. They re-released it over in Korea and made, again, it probably way more. If you dig deep enough, you'll find that the movie made way more than 30 million worldwide, because what Tarantino did, as far as I know, Park Chan-wook had no idea that his film was submitted to the Cannes Film Festival in 2004. Wow. And it was nominated for the big prize, the Palme d'Or. Again, these French words, I'm not really good with French. But he ended up winning the second place prize, the Grand Prix. He won the Grand Prix award at the Cannes Film Festival that year, but it was because of Tarantino defending that movie. I think the movie had lost by 1 vote.
Oh, wow.
So Fahrenheit 9/11, I think, won the Palme d'Or, and not as many people talk about that movie now. I mean,
right.
You would not think a movie like Oldboy, a movie that has a plot twist dealing with incest. We got to talk about the plot of the movie. Yeah. Yes, the guy's in prison for 15 years, but why is he in prison for 15 years? Him and the antagonists of the story were part of a school, the nickname the Old Boys. He saw that him and his sister were engaging in sexual acts. So imagine, again, I've never seen anyone in my life commit incest. Just it's the thought of that happening at your own school. He doesn't mean to catch them, but he sees a couple people going at it. He's a young guy, and he actually was attracted to that girl because there is a little scene beforehand where he's kind of flirting with her. He's kind of like the popular ladies' man of the school, the King Oedipus character that we were talking about. He happens to catch both of them in the act of that. And of course, because of him, it spreads throughout the school. Of course, it makes them depressed, and she commits suicide. The poor brother has to see his sister like literally let go of his hand. She's trying to jump off this ledge. And if you notice, another quick observation here. Remember at the beginning of the movie,
it's the same
the King Oedipus character is trying to save the guy from killing himself. It's the same hand motion. It was like the same angle.
Yep.
Like literally the same. There's a suicide at the beginning of the movie, not off a ledge into the water and drowning, like what happened to the antagonist's sister. He tries to save a guy from committing suicide with his dog at the beginning. But at same angle and everything like that. But it was the whole thing that really wrecked the brother, Not imagining having sexual relations with your sister. Because I have a sister. There's no way that would ever happen. It's a plot that you don't see in a movie. You were talking to me about it. It's very rare for a revenge incest plot line. And that's the twist of the movie. And again, if you haven't seen the movie, I hope this doesn't deter you from it if you're listening to this conversation, because Oldboy is not about incest. The plot has something to do with it, but the movie is not. That's not what it's all about. And the fact that you got the brother seeing the woman he loves in his own flesh and blood, killing herself like that, drowning, pushing his hand so he lets go. It affected him in a deep way. And so the movie literally starts off with him talking to the guy trying to commit suicide. He tells the backstory of how he was drunk, arrested for his public drunkenness at the beginning. There's a couple funny scenes at the beginning in a very dark movie. He mysteriously disappears, and it was his daughter's 4th birthday. And he had a present for her, the wings there that you see at the beginning. He was trying to get home so he could have the celebration with his daughter and his wife. His best friend, trying to talk to his wife on the phone, he's mysteriously disappeared, and then he's confined, and he doesn't know where the heck he is, so it's really hard to keep track of what's going on. But 15 years he's in this confined area, and he has a fake backdrop, so he can't see what's going on in the outside world. His only connection is a TV that they have in there for him. So the TV's playing, and his wife is brutally murdered, and they blame him for it.
Yeah.
And he had nothing to do with it. And that's the thing. Like, they say his daughter is murdered too. And so he's in jail for 15 years. He's constantly being gassed, knocked out, and he's being hypnotized. I mean, what a plot line. I mean, a guy forced in prison, and not only does he have to deal with being gassed on a nightly basis, but he's kind of like under hypnosis, which is it's a very bizarre movie. It's not for all tastes, but something jived with a lot of people because it's now considered one of the greatest films ever made, period. I wouldn't go that far, but it is a movie that I've revisited several times. So it's a movie that I revere, and it would be in my top 250 films of all time.
Mm-hmm.
No, but Choi Min-sik and the actor who plays the antagonist, they really got into the role. I don't know if you noticed, Adam, but Choi Min-sik's character, he's obviously kind of chubby at the beginning when you see him drunk.
Yeah.
He's sloshed at the police station. He lost 20 pounds, and he learned how to box. Mm-hmm. And everyone talks about that fight sequence in the corridor there.
Yeah,
that fight sequence. Yeah. It's one shot. Yeah, it's considered one of the greatest one-shot sequences of all time, you know? And he literally learned how to box. So, you know, you see him in the jail cell. Unfortunately, the close-ups where he's punching the walls, they're real. They're not like real walls, but they're padded a certain way where it would hurt. Mm-hmm. It was someone else doing that because they didn't want it. They didn't want Choi's hands to be like broken,
right?
Because I mean, the amount of times he punches that wall and everything like that, which always reminds me, because I'm a huge Scorsese fan of Raging Bull, the scene where De Niro's character Jake LaMotta is like, why at the end like that? He's just punching the wall, you know, and his hands are bleeding, and he bashes his head against it, stuff. But I kind of wonder if he was kind of inspired by Raging Bull there for a second when he's pounding his fists into the wall like that. But yeah, he learned how to box, and the guy who's the antagonist really got into yoga. Mm-hmm. I mean, you look at him, you don't really see a few scenes where he's naked from a side profile, but he really buffed himself up, and he learned the art of yoga. And some of those maneuvers in there, forget it. Like, I mean, he literally trained. They both trained really hard for this movie. So the actors really got into the material. I mean, just so you know, Choi Min-sik is probably one of the most famous South Korean actors of all time. Mm-hmm. And you know, and this was like a completely different role for him at the time. You know,
it's a completely different role for anybody. I mean, again, you know, this movie was shot beautifully. It definitely had a good pace, keeps your attention. You really do get invested as you're watching it to see what's going on and how it's playing out. However, like we said before we started recording, mm-hmm. How does one, as they're about to make a movie and they're writing a movie, say,
right,
you know what would be an excellent plot twist? You know what's going to get everybody's attention, get revenge incest. And then to go about writing it, mm-hmm. it makes you scratch your head.
Right.
You know, and then to be an actor playing it, to know that this story is playing out, and right. You're doing the horizontal shuffle with your daughter.
Yeah, but before even any of that happens, you know, you don't know why you're in prison for so long.
Yeah,
and the guy comes out and he's broken. Like, yeah, the Vertigo character, Jimmy Stewart's character, he becomes obsessed, not for the same reasons, but he wants to know who did this to him and why. But it's almost like his imprisonment, if you will, is like the epilogue. It's like a prelude, because I guess the word insidious is the one word I can find.
Yeah, you know, and again, I had heard about Old Boy before watching it. You know, mm-hmm. I knew the concepts, the ideas of it. And I was surprised because I thought I was going to see a movie basically about torture. I thought the majority of the movie was going to be the 15 years in the cell.
Right.
And it really isn't. It's only about 20, 30 minutes of the movie.
It's basically the epilogue of the movie. Yeah. And that's, again, I said this at the beginning, Park Chan-wook was more fascinated with, you know, the questions afterwards.
Right.
You know, and even the antagonist is like, you're asking the wrong questions. You know?
Yeah.
And I know the morality of Old Boy, it had been a huge topic of debate, you know, the whole incest plot twist. I mean, Park, though, says he never intended to have those shock tactics. You know, he goes, he had no objection to a film being used in that fashion, I guess.
Right.
And his movies are, again, they're very complex movies. What he wanted to do with this movie and the Vengeance trilogy as a whole, his interest was like the rage emotion.
Right.
That's what he said in an interview. Rage, it's increasingly fueled by the harshness and the impersonal nature of society. So there is a little bit of overtone of how society was. You got to remember, at the time he was making Old Boy, I think actually more of joint security area. But in the early 2000s, from what I don't know all of the deep history of Korea, there's a lot of dictators involved.
Sure.
And that he lived through that growing up, because I saw some different things for this movie, different like interviews, talking about the legacy of Old Boy. And I guess you got to think, Park Chan-wook just turned 60. He was born in 1963. So when he was watching a lot of these Sam Fuller westerns, these Sam Peckinpah films, I mean, he saw some of Hitchcock's movies on video. But again, video for them was VHS, Betamax,
right,
in the 80s. And there were some film critics that went over to Korea in the 80s, and there wasn't a lot of options for movies.
No.
And basically, from what I understand, you watch a movie in the theaters over there in the 80s, early 90s, and the English films had no subtitles. So you had to have a knowledge of the English language to watch these movies. South Korea had some movie plexes because, I mean, American troops have been stationed over there since,
50s.
During the Korean War, and I think even before that. But
right.
In any event, there wasn't a lot of options when it came to world cinema for them. You only had the Korean films at that time, but they were subject to being heavily cut and edited for censorship.
Sure.
So he grew up at that time, so there's a reason why probably a lot of the subject matter, this complicated subject matter, pops up in a lot of these South Korean films, because these guys grew up in the 60s and 70s, which again, very different time.
Sure.
Different time. But yeah, from what I understand in different interviews, Park Chan-wook was all interested about the emotion of rage. Well,
you get it there. I mean, again, again, take the controversial plot twists aside. This movie, it's a story of you're kidnapped, held in captivity for 15 years, and then you're randomly let out and told to go find your jailer.
Right. Literally, the antagonist is like, "Come find me."
Yeah,
he's literally saying that. He's challenging him to find. And it's like, you don't see that in vengeance movies.
Right.
You really don't. You don't really see "come find me" if you can. It's a twisted game.
Right.
It really is, and it's so fascinating and how he dealt with the whole revenge story, because it is a story. It is a revenge story. We've seen it play over and over and over again as far back as Shakespeare.
Sure.
Even King Oedipus to a certain degree. But the story of revenge is just such a time, or a story that's been told over and over again, but presented in this fashion, where the guy who does it's like you've got a guy getting out of jail. He wants to find who his captor is, get revenge on him. But the guy who does the kidnapping is getting revenge on him. So you got like two different twisted styles of revenge going on. So when the King Oedipus guy gets out of prison, being in prison, he's hypnotized and literally in a suitcase.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, the guy's literally in a suitcase, and it was a real suitcase. They really had to find a size for Choi to fit in. It's just, imagine being in a suitcase. But he rolls out of it, and he has no idea where the heck he is. Everything's changed. I mean, 15 years, things change. And and he mysteriously has a guy up in the street giving him a cell phone and a huge wad of cash. And now what? So he goes, and another very talked about scene is when he eats the live octopus.
Yes.
That was a scene where, I mean, the director felt so bad because he goes, I hope people don't think Koreans eat octopus that way, because that's not how octopuses are eaten. It was just the way you heard in jail, I'm going to chew them all down.
Yeah.
So it's like he's got some life and he's chewing it all down.
Yeah.
But even then, you know, he's kind of under a hypnosis, so to speak, and he meets a sushi chef in there, and they connect right away. The sushi chef, who turns out to be his daughter.
Yeah.
It was all, I mean, you find out the antagonist has raised his daughter all this time for 15 years, help, you know, fund for her, care for her, and everything like that. Sounds all nice. I mean, the guy's not totally evil. I mean, you do kind of, you don't really sympathize with him too much, but you understand. That's the beauty of these anti-heroes. And I'm not going to say that the antagonist is an anti-hero, but you understand where the guy's coming from,
right?
You know, in his own twisted way. You know, he was in love with his sister, you know, and the guy caught them making out with each other, and it caused a huge problem, very fatal problem, because his sister ended up committing suicide. So the rage, like he was talking about the rage, we are all expected to kind of repress the rage. Let's face it, people tick us off all the time.
Sure.
Society, politicians, we get very angry about it. But we can't just lash out like that. The rage is it's okay to be angry. It's how you channel it. And, of course, these two guys suppress it so much, it just becomes insidious. Again, I use the word insidious because I just, you know, that's what it is.
Well, this was channeled to the extreme.
Yes,
very
much so.
extreme.
But yeah, so this guy, you know, he falls in love with this young woman. I think she's got to be, because she was 4 when he was kidnapped, so 15 years goes by. So she's like 19 or 20. And, you know, she takes care of him because he passes out in the middle of the restaurant, which we find out later it was under his hypnosis. Mm-hmm. But so they kind of form a bond. And he kind of wants to go at her right away because again, he was under hypnosis.
Right.
But they eventually fall in love, and there is it's, I don't say a graphic sex scene, but it's very intense sex scene in the movie. And, you know, the guy's recording it. He's recording the audio of it. And it's played back for him later on. And it's his own daughter. The big box. He opens it up, sees all her pictures, and you kind of see him, oh no.
Yeah.
Oh no. And the rest of us as an audience, you know, we'd have no idea of what to expect at that point. And talk about one of the biggest plot twists in the past 20 years. That has to be one of them.
Everybody who sees this movie says, oh no, with that character at that same moment.
Right. And, you know, and again, the movie did not do very well at the box office, but Tarantino was a champion of this movie, and it's found a huge life on home media. And I just found out, I looking over some of my notes here, which are disorganized and all over the place, so I'm sorry that this episode is kind of like a scatterbrained kind of rant. But just so you know, Park actually earned a degree in philosophy at the Sogang University. I think that was I don't know if that was the one used in the film or not, but his real interest was not in philosophy. It says here it was in the aesthetics of ideas and how they were expressed. So, you know, maybe he could be an art critic, but again, Vertigo changed all of that. He literally said, I left the theater knowing that I had to at least try to make a movie because it was the one way he could express the feelings he had about pictures and emotion. And he was talking, I mentioned it earlier, you know, Jimmy Stewart. Have you seen Vertigo, Adam?
Of course.
The obsession, you know how James Stewart's is like very irrational obsession. I mean, he's on the point of madness. But he describes it. Park Chan-wook describes James Stewart's obsession. It was the kind of beauty he responded to. Mm-hmm. Because you think of Vertigo, it's very dark.
Right.
Very, very dark. But it's a beautiful movie. And that's exactly what Old Boy is.
I agree.
The subject matter for Old Boy, we can discuss the morals of the characters, but that's not the point of the movie. It's very dark, but it's so beautiful. Look at those shots at the end. They shot those ending shots in New Zealand.
Right.
I mean, talk about an amazing landscape to end a movie.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's one thing I will say about watching this movie. This movie was shot beautifully. And again, it's something that it holds your attention. I was expecting, again, a gore fest because I knew of the torture. There's very little blood in it, but a lot of old school filmmaking implied techniques, which I love. Will always be the one to say that what you think of in your head is more terrifying than anything they could ever show on screen. So, and you had a lot of that in there. Yeah. We talked about the scene where he de-teeths one of his captors, and he gets de-teethed himself. And then later. Yeah. But again, like an Eli Roth or a Tarantino, where they would zoom in on the tooth as it's being distracted.
Right.
You see him going for it, and then you get the big wide shot. So it's happening. It's implied. But
you see a little bit of the tooth being pulled, the blood coming out, but then it cuts away. You know what's going to happen. You don't really need to dwell on it. But Old Boy he was already a success with Joint Security Area.
Right.
But again, Old Boy came and went, and he was shocked that it was submitted to the Cannes Film Festival. And from there, boom. I mean, because of Old Boy, Hollywood had some belated interest, if you will. I don't know if you know this or not, but Sam Raimi, remember that Evil Dead reboot in 2013? Yep. He wanted Park Chan-wook to direct it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he did make a Hollywood movie, Stoker. Did you ever watch that?
No.
Nicole Kidman?
I've heard of it. I've never seen it.
Yeah. See, my wife had that, and that was one of his movies that I kind of hemmed and hawed about. See, he's had a few failures as a filmmaker. I guess you could call them failures, but I mean, he made a comedy movie after he did the Vengeance trilogy,
right?
And again, the Vengeance trilogy, if you haven't seen it yet, it's not a movie sense where there's like a certain like character or story arc that connects all three of them. The only thing is failed vengeance,
right?
Because there is vengeance in all three of those movies. I mean, it's the Vengeance trilogy, but the vengeance is not what you expect, and it's always a failure in some way. Mm-hmm. If you watch Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, Sympathy for Lady Vengeance, or Lady Vengeance, the title, whatever one you want to call it. But Park Chan-wook he's had some misfires, but he came back in a huge way with The Handmaiden in 2016, his pro-lesbian film. Again, it's more to it than that. That's actually based on a novel too. And then most recently, Decision to Leave, which is a tragic romance, a doomed romance. So I mean, he's definitely hit on all aspects. But he did a Hollywood production with Nicole Kidman called Stoker, which it wasn't a huge success. But Sam Raimi was really interested in having him direct the reboot of Evil Dead. Mm-hmm. So I guess we can talk about, since we were talking about Hollywood here, I mean, obviously he had a lot of fans. Tarantino, right. Steven Spielberg is a huge fan. I don't know if you read about that or not.
No.
So let's rewind, let's rewind back. We're kind of rewinding and then fast forwarding. So fast forward 5 years after Old Boy, Steven Spielberg is interested in doing a Hollywood remake, if you will. I don't know
Spielberg?
what. I know that's what I mean. A noted critic, Tony Raines, was saying, "I wonder what attracted Spielberg to this. Was it the him fighting off 20 guys with a hammer? Was it the teeth pulling? Was it the incest?" Steven Spielberg obviously loved the movie as well, and I don't know what made him I think he even explored like the screenwriting part of it, with it, but he kind of left it, and Spike Lee picked up with it. Which,
well, I mean, as far as Spielberg goes, I mean, again, if you're a fan of cinema and you're a fan of filmmaking, you're going to watch this movie and see how beautifully shot it is, and you're not going to not be inspired and enjoy that, despite the context of the movie. So, I mean,
yeah,
that could have been his draw. That could have been his, his interest in it.
Yeah, it's just the way Park Chan-wook made Old Boy. It's like if I'm a filmmaker, I'm offered a chance to remake it. Why?
Yeah, right.
I mean, obviously, I've never seen. I don't dare watch. I've seen bits and pieces of Josh Brolin, going nuts, cutting people up a little bit, and I mean, obviously, Spike Lee's movie is going to be a little more violent,
right?
But Spike Lee actually had a couple of different versions of it. The first version, when he made it, was almost 2.5 hours long.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but the producers, well, they re-edited the movie. The current runtime, I think, is it's not quite 2. I think it's like an hour, 45 minutes. I guess it included the one-shot hammer scene. I mean, that's the scene I've seen on YouTube a few times, and of course the cutting of the throat. Mm-hmm. I guess Spike Lee, of course, Spike Lee. I love Spike, like 2 or 3 of his movies. But he's usually unhappy with some of his movies,
Right.
I mean, he's obviously very proud of the Black Klansman, and he should be. Other than the ending, I didn't really like the documentary footage at the end. We're not going to talk about that. But Malcolm X, Do the Right Thing is one of the greatest movies. But yeah, Spike Lee was not happy when the producers re-edited the movie. Obviously, a lot was cut.
Right.
Going from 2 hours and 20 minutes down to an hour 45.
Did Spike Lee, did they keep the incest angle on it?
I haven't seen it. I'm going to try to dig up some information about it.
Because, I mean, the Korean audience is way different than the American audience.
Yeah.
So I find that as a very hard sell to the
So
American.
this is the plot of the Spike Lee movie, okay? Again, I'm kind of ignorant. When I see a perfect movie like Old Boy, I don't want to watch a remake of it. It's like when Gus Van Sant, I hate to even acknowledge the Psycho. Why? There was nothing other than more nude and more violence. There was no need for it. But anyway, so this is the plot I'm reading about Spike Lee's version. You got this alcoholic advertising executive, so kind of a similar fashion.
Right.
He gets drunk after losing on a major account, so slight plot variation. Before he passes out, though, he sees a woman with a yellow umbrella. So this is a little different here. Obviously, Spike Lee's not going to make it shot for shot because Spike Lee does have some creative juices. So when he awakes, he finds himself locked within a hotel room. His unseen captors provide him with food, alcohol, hygiene items, but they do not explain why he is captive. He sees news report that his ex-wife, so obviously because of his alcoholism, you assume, he's separated from his wife. His ex-wife was raped and murdered, and that he's the prime suspect. So there are some similar angles. And their infant daughter was adopted. Okay? So over the next 20 years, so I think there is some similarities here.
Yeah.
He quits drinking, works himself into shape, again, just like, in Park Chan-wook's Old Boy. His intent on escaping, getting revenge, he compiles a list of all those who would want to imprison him. Again, that's very similar.
Yeah.
And he writes letters to eventually give to Mia. He sees an interview with Mia who says she would forgive her father if she ever saw him. So again, he doesn't, in the 2003 Old Boy, he never sees anything about his daughter. They actually even allude that his daughter is killed.
Yes.
So he thinks his daughter and his wife are both, obviously his wife is killed, but he thinks his daughter is. So going back to the Spike Lee version, so after he sees an interview with his daughter on TV, he's drugged and wakes to find himself outside with a cell phone and several $1,000s. Kind of similar. Mm-hmm. There's no hypnotist angle in this one, though. He sees the woman with the yellow umbrella, gives chase, but ends up running into this nurse who offers to help him. And her name, I guess, is Marie. Mm-hmm. He refuses, but takes her business card. He goes to his bar owner friend, explained what has transpired, and while there, he gets a call on his cell phone from a man calling himself the Stranger, mocking him. So he spends a deal of effort to determine if any of the men on his list are the actual Stranger dudes, but they all prove to be innocent. So from there, he collapses, and he calls Marie, the nurse, for help. And while he recovers, Marie is taken emotionally by his letters to Mia and offers to help him further. So she helps him identify the restaurant where some of his food came from while he was imprisoned. So he follows a delivery truck from the restaurant. Again, I'm doing a spoiler review for Spike Lee's Old Boy as well, because we have to talk about the classic 20-year-old film now. So we got to talk about Spike Lee's film, which is now 10 years old. So Joe follows a delivery from the restaurant to the warehouse where he was in prison and meets the owner, whom, well, he tortures.
Yeah.
He tortures him. And the guy confesses that the Stranger arranged his imprisonment. And on his return to the bar, he finds the Stranger there with the woman with the yellow umbrella. So I think he recognized the yellow umbrella and realized it was him and also his bodyguard. So the Stranger tells Joe, that's the character's name, that they have kidnapped Mia. And he says if Joe can determine the Stranger's identity within 46 hours, he'll free her and give him $20 million in diamonds, prove his innocence, and that he will himself commit suicide. So there are some similarities in the plot here. But Joe learns that the owner of the bar and his men are seeking revenge by attacking Marie. He races there only to be captured by the bar owner. But just as the bar owner is about to beat him savagely, the Stranger calls the bar owner, tells him a large sum of cash has just been left on the doorstep in exchange for Joe's release. Mm-hmm. So they let him go because he doesn't want anything to happen to him, because this is part of the revenge. So Marie identifies the Stranger's ringtone as the anthem of the Evergreen Academy. And again, Evergreen is brought up in the original Old Boy movie as well. They learn that many years prior, the school was bought by an anonymous corporation and closed. So they break into the office, look through yearbooks. Joe recognizes one student and recalls tormenting his sister Amanda for her promiscuity, which led to the revelation that their father had incestuous relations with them both.
Uh-huh.
So the antagonist is not the one doing the incest. He is a victim. Both him and his sister are victims. As a result, Arthur moved them to Luxembourg, but later murdered his wife and his sister. But later murdered his wife, and Amanda severely wounded Adrian and committed suicide. So Joe calls the bartender with the name, and the bartender confirms that Joe's guess that the Stranger is Adrian. That's the name of the antagonist here. However, when the bartender insults Amanda, Adrian, who is listening on a cloned cell phone, kills him before Joe can arrive. And then Joe hides Marie, the nurse, in a hotel for her safety. Of course, they make love, unaware that Adrian is watching them through hidden cameras. So Joe then goes to Adrian's penthouse, and kind of similar to, Park Chan-wook's Old Boy, defeats, kills his bodyguard, confronts Adrian. Adrian congratulates him, gives him the diamonds, and is escorting him to where Mia is. However, Adrian asks Joe to think why he had let Joe go in the first place and shows that the interview with Mia was all a setup. And Mia was a paid actress. Are you starting to get it?
Yeah.
Connect the dots here?
Yeah.
Adrian shows that Marie really is his daughter and that he engineered events to this point to make Joe feel what it's like to lose everything. Adrian then commits suicide. Joe is horrified, writes Marie a letter saying they can never see each other again, leaves her most of the diamonds, using the rest to pay off the bartender to return him to the captivity of the hotel room. So, yeah, completely different ending, but kind of the same plot.
Right.
Again, I don't really like Spike Lee's whole thing. I mean, the victim of... See, if he focused on the victim of being in an incestuous relationship, maybe that would have been more of an interesting story, but I don't know. Making him lose everything, it's like, well, okay, I guess kind of in a way he did. And Spike Lee's movie has been panned everywhere.
Right.
There are some fans of the movie, but I mean, obviously not as revered as Park Chan-wook's Old Boy. Again, I'm ignorant. I have not watched the Spike Lee movie. I have no want to watch it. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from Spike Lee. He is a brilliant filmmaker. He's made some legit great films, but I cannot bring myself to watch his version of Old Boy. I'm going to stick with Park Chan-wook's vision of the manga. I don't know about you.
Well, it's the only version I know now, so I'm. You know,
I know you're kind of new to. You've watched some world cinema, but I think this is. Have you watched any other Korean film?
No, not that I mean, if I have, I wasn't. You
weren't
aware of it. So
yeah, I mean, Old Boy was. I heard about a lot of conversations against Scorsese mentioned it. And Tarantino obviously loved it. And, at the time I was watching a lot of Scorsese and Tarantino films. And Old Boy, I have not seen anything like it before or since. I really haven't.
So I don't think anyone.
Right.
It's very unique in that sense.
So I know you're still probably wrapping your mind around the movie you just saw last night.
Okay.
So you heard me rant how much I love the movie and how much I consider it one of the top 250 films I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. How would you rank it amongst the films you've seen? Oh, I know it's hard because you just saw it last night.
Okay. So let me kind of like break down how I rank stuff. So if you're going between a 0 and a 1, it's a movie that I just hate. I can't find anything I like about it. Mm-hmm. Between a 1 and a 2.5, I'm looking at a movie that I don't like, but I can find something in there that I appreciate. Mm-hmm. 2.5 to 3.5, this is where I like the movie, but we're talking about rewatchability. Mm-hmm. Will I revisit it again?
Right.
4, then the 3.5 to 4.5, I'm looking, I'll watch it again, recommend it. There's multiple things I like. And then you get to 5, and to me, it's the perfect movie for me. Old Boy, watching it once, again, I thought for a movie that, like, I will admit that I went in like, do I really want to watch a movie about, imprisonment and incest? And then when I watched it, it kept my attention, and it was, again, beautifully shot, well paced. The characters were incredibly fleshed out and portrayed. Oh, I think I would give Old Boy, based on the first watch, in my scale, I'm probably going to give it 3.1. I really liked it. Again, I really liked how it was shot. I liked the pacing. I liked the implied violence instead of just the straight up torture porn that, I was expecting. And, even with the very controversial subtext of the incest, it was compelling to watch. Why I put it at a 3.1, I don't know if I would ever revisit it. Mm-hmm.
I hope you do, because
it's kind of it's in that category of Really glad I watched it. Don't know if I'll go back to it. So I'll give it a 3.1.
I think I've seen the movie 5-6 times in the span of like a 15, 16-year period. I cannot sit down and watch this movie all the time. Martin Scorsese, he's like my vessel for movies. If Martin Scorsese says this is a film he recommends, I will watch it once. This is one, both him and especially Tarantino. I know Scorsese loves Park Chan-wook's work as well. So watching Oldboy for the 5th time, 6th time, I think. I lose count sometimes, but I know I have not seen that movie 10 times. Every time I watch it, my appreciation grows for it. I hope, Adam, whether it's a couple weeks, several months, several years, I hope you do watch it again. Mm-hmm. I really encourage you to watch it again. I'm not forcing you to.
No.
But I highly encourage you to watch a movie like Oldboy at least one more time to see if you still have that, because my prediction is that you will not see it the same way as you saw it the first time. Sure.
I totally admit that. I totally, again, I'm just not sure if I will, but again, I'm glad I watched it.
Yes.
I'm glad I was open enough to watch something with that type of content. It is a beautiful film. It's a beautifully shot, beautifully executed film. That's why I put it in the 3 category. This was an enjoyable watch, if that makes any sense.
It does. It does. And Vertigo is another one. Like, that's a movie inspired generations of filmmakers. Vertigo is another example of a movie that flopped.
Right.
It was not a success, but like fine wine, it ages and it only gets better each and every single time you watch it. And Oldboy, even Park Chan-wook, is like 20 years is not a long time for art. But I know I can safely say no one ever talks about the rest of the Vengeance movies. Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, again, a very difficult watch. So is Lady Vengeance. There's a lot of tough issues in there. The plots are so complex. I suggest you go and read it. I'm not going to go into Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance and Lady Vengeance. We could have another 2-hour conversation talking about those 2 movies. But I highly recommend you watch them in order. I did not. I watch Oldboy first, and if that's how you do it, go ahead. But Oldboy is a movie I recommend you watch. You need time to process it.
Yeah.
So dragging you in here talking about Oldboy, like literally a few hours after you watched it, is probably not fair, because that's a movie you need to sit with for a while. It's like you have fast food.
Yeah.
And then you have a gourmet meal. A Park Chan-wook movie, you're having a very rich gourmet meal.
So, Chris, just because I threw out a number, what is your number? Obviously, you hold this in very high regard.
Yeah, it's really hard for me to give a 5 rating to a movie that, again, has incest in its plot, but this is a movie I can overlook that. It's a movie that needs to be seen multiple times. It has to be seen multiple times, just because it's like a gut punch, and you're literally beaten up after you watch this movie.
Right.
You really are. But it's a movie that has earned that praise. Mm-hmm. It really has. So I highly recommend Oldboy. Again, if you're a big fan of Oldboy, I've had it on DVD. I have it on a Blu-ray set. Arrow did an amazing job restoring these films. They're region B, so you have to get a region-free Blu-ray player. If you are a film collector of any kind, I highly encourage you to get a region-free Blu-ray player so you can watch some of these movies, again, that are really hard to get. In the United States, you cannot get an Oldboy release. Mm-hmm. You might be able to find the old Tartan Asian video on DVD. You might be able to find that somewhere. I think that's out of print now, though. You might be able to find it at different online retailers, but Neon Pictures has got this amazing 20th anniversary 4K restoration. And it's only in 4K. The Blu-ray on that is the extra features, which has that 3.5 hour video diary that Park Chan-wook made himself, going into the depths of the film. And I need to watch that. And if you're a fan of Oldboy, you need to watch it too. I don't know why I haven't watched it yet, but you need to watch that. And there's also almost 2-hour documentary made by another filmmaker about the impact of Oldboy. I just barely got a hold of this box set myself, which has all 3 Vengeance movies. But Oldboy itself, if you are a fan of that movie, you have to have it in your collection. Either go for the Arrow 3 Blu-ray set. You got to have a region-free player. And then Neon Pictures overseas. And again, I believe that 4K discs play in all 4K players. You have to have a 4K player, obviously, to play the Old Boy Neon Special 20th Anniversary box set that's you can pre-order now. I know Diabolic DVD, you can pre-order it there if it's still available. You know, it's an amazing thing. Diabolic DVD, they have not paid for me to endorse them. They are my vessel for checking out all of these world films that you cannot buy in this country.
Chris, this is what I love about doing this particular show. Yeah, because we are called Scared for Real, so we do kind of lean towards a more macabre side of cinema, but we are also doing these cult foreign, introducing me and hopefully the listeners here to these movies that maybe they would have never given a thought about or knew about.
Let's put it this way. Old Boy is not considered a horror movie, but there's a lot of macabre stuff going on.
You think? Old Boy definitely falls into the cult status 100%. Guys, tell us what you think.
If you've seen Old Boy, if you want to chime in, correct me, correct Adam, go ahead, because we encourage interaction here. And my bold prediction is give Old Boy another 20 years, it will rise above the cult status. Like Vertigo at the time could have been conceived as a cult movie.
Sure.
But I think Old Boy, give it another 20, 30 years. If we're still around at the 50th anniversary of Old Boy, I can almost 100% guarantee that Old Boy will not be considered a cult film, but considered one of the greatest films ever made.
Couldn't have said it better. Like, subscribe, shares. Guys, comment, Get involved, suggest. What do you want us to talk about? Do you want us to watch? Tell us your thoughts on these movies. Next week, episode 4, we're going back to classic horror into what I think was the dawn of American horror. We are talking 92 years of Frankenstein, all things Frankenstein, the sequels, the cultural impact, and...
Yeah, we're in one more thing about Old Boy and Frankenstein. They were both officially released on November 21st.
Can't end any better than that.
All right, again.
See you next time.
Scared for Reals. Subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on social media. We are everything horror, B-movie, cult films.
We'll see you next time on Scared for Reals.